Hello, everybody. EU Hangout or EU timed Hangout today for our month of May. And people start trickling in. I just posted the link. In the meantime, I just got off of work at a new place. Doing some new kind of work. Familiar work, certainly, but still new. And pretty cool. Oh, there we are. Shush. I thought I had that muted. That's all right. Let's see. Silverwind, good evening.
Good evening, Andrew.
How you doing?
I'm pretty good. How about you?
Well, just started some new work, actually, doing editing on a Mac and video program that I'm unfamiliar with, but I kind of like it.
Sounds interesting.
Should help improve my... Well, I'm going to do a vlog on it later today, but...
Hello.
Good. Donald, greetings.
It is good for finally make a EU Patron Chat. At least my work hours allowed me to do so today.
Yeah, we're happy to have you and Victor joining us. Welcome.
Hello. Now, this Victor, do you live in the European Union? Because when I was at work today, Monday coming up, it is Victoria Day, and I was just curious. Do you have any important holidays like Victoria Day or Canada Day for the European countries? Just curious. I know the states have President's Day.
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of them, and particularly Sweden has Midsummer, for example, with the maypole and all that. Not sure what more to say about it.
I know. Yeah, I know each individual country had their own national holiday. Just curious if the EU have a big holiday that everyone have off, like Canada's Day.
I mean, we don't really have one big one that I can think of that is like all of EU. There are certain ones that I think like certain, like I live in Sweden, so I think there are at least certain days that all of Scandinavia has on the same dates and such, but I'm not sure if there's anything like over any majority of the European Union or anything like that.
I would assume there would be a day to celebrate the European Union being around, like an anniversary. That would be a government holiday, I would assume, or some kind.
I'll follow up on that question. I've been wondering, is there a sense of where European Union is like a thing to identify with pride and its importance, or is it no? We're also still our own countries. We're just got this trade thing going on.
Here in England, there's a bit of contestment over that because there's quite a ruckus going on right now of whether or not we should even stay in the EU. And most of the people saying we should leave are basically fear-mongering about how terrible it would be if we do leave and how we're going to collapse and all die. So
this actually reminds me of one example in Canada. Anyone who live in North America would probably remember this. Andrew, you would be older than me. You would remember how Quebec wanted to be its own country within Canada. It's quite interesting. If Quebec, in theory, did become its own country, it would have had its own currency, its own regulation, and would affect Canada as a whole. So I'm sort of glad that Canada have Quebec as a neighbor still, but would be curious how the EU would function if a country leave it.
Fun fact about that I come to think of when you mention places becoming like their own region. There is actually a group here in Sweden who, in a demonstrative fashion, this is not something that they actually believe they could physically do, but it's something they do to sort of like demonstrate their opinion. And what they do is that they go down to the border between, well, not the border, so to speak, but like the border between the southernmost region of Sweden and like the rest of it, and then they start digging along the border, and they like the region they're digging around is called Skåne, and their union is called Dig Away Skåne, because what they're historically Skåne is a part of Sweden that has been it's been owned by Denmark for long parts of history, and there's been a lot of contention between the regions, and Skåne as a region has some political differences in general opinions and such, and there's also of course stereotypes, but let's not linger on those as much. But yeah, so there are people who literally are saying, "Go, make yourself your own country. We don't want you," which is a bit of a different situation, but just came to my mind when you mentioned it.
Let me hop in here and welcome everybody else who's joining us. I see Yaren, Jonathan, Gavin. I see Gavin. I don't know what Gavin looks like outside of like the bleak of dark evening, so this is weird. But welcome everybody. Welcome all.
Hi, thanks.
Glad to have you here. This can really just be a free form, whatever kind of chat you want to have. I have subjects that we could steer the conversation. We're all here as gamers, but if something else comes up, then that's fine too.
I will begin with the first question on the Facebook page. One of the patrons actually brought up a good question. What make a very good NPC or a memorable one? I think two other people answered his question as well, but it's just something I thought about it.
Sure. Anyone want to hop in on that one? Memorable NPCs, memorable characters. What are some things that you do if you're a game master, the things you've seen done if you're a player?
The immediate thought is for them to have some sort of identifying feature, but that may also signify them as very vestigial or just, identified by that. So there's obviously more to it than that.
Usually something unique, like a unique voice to the character and unique features that the character might have.
Yeah, you need to. It needs to have like. There needs to be a sort of life to it. Doesn't necessarily have to be developed in all angles and all aspects, but you need to feel like there's some. I'm not sure if it's the right word to say dynamic, but like there's something about them that makes them feel not like a set of parameters, but like a being, so to speak.
I am thinking the word individualism.
Yeah, something along those lines.
One of the things I try to do is I try to make them relate to the real world and problems that we all go through. Such as they could be depressed, they could have anger management issues, things along those lines that we all have experienced at some point.
Yeah, I mean, to some extent, it's always with people in general, it's always the small little things that aren't necessarily good or bad, or the things that are like very subjectively good or bad, depending on how the character or person perceives it. It's a lot about the like small little things around it that make it more than just an NPC in a video game, in a very basic video game. It's not the tutorial character saying press B to jump. It's someone actually talking to you,
So like some sort of emotional connection between the players and the NPC.
Yeah, they need to feel that this is a person in the world as opposed to a literal part of the world that they are playing. That's actually an important part of immersion as well.
Let's
Sorry,
move
go on.
out of theory, and if you can think of an actual character that was memorable that you've come across in a game, and can maybe identify what was memorable about them, maybe a couple things that really made these NPCs stand out in your memory. We could share those stories and maybe get some examples.
One NPC which I dislike and like at the same time. I've been playing Star Wars: The Old Republic, playing through the Sith Inquisitor line. One of these Sith
Oh, we've lost sound on you, Donald.
Well, something in the Sith Inquisitor line.
I think he muted or.
There's a couple of characters I might mention. I don't know if any of you have played, if any of you are big fans of Nintendo, but there's a couple of games. They have the Pikmin games, and their main characters, so they're not NPCs, but they've had several playable characters in these games, and the ones I always found most interesting are the ones who have, there's these logs that you can make as you play, and some of the characters have really interesting logs. Like in the second one, you get Olimar and Louis, and Olimar just gives like this generic adventure log, where he gives he writes up what he thinks of all the things that you find, what he thinks of all the enemies you fight. Oh, that's strange.
Why don't you keep going and finish your example?
Can everyone hear me?
I can
I can hear you.
Oh yeah, I hear you now. My headset just died on me for a second.
Oh, fair enough.
Let's everyone finish your story, and then we'll go back to Donald.
Yeah, in the second Pikmin, it's Olimar and Louis, and Olimar just gives sort of a basic adventure guide about all the things you find, where he just describes in a sort of plain manner all these different monsters you fight, and then Louis gives this guideline about how he'd cook all of them, and what they taste like, and how he's gonna flambe and caramelize everything, and how he would eat all the different things. And then when you come up some of the most terrifying bosses in the game, this thing called the Water Wraith, he just says, "No, don't try it, don't eat it. That'll just give you stomachache, and you'll be out cold for a week. Don't go anywhere near it." And it just made him so much more memorable than Olimar, that he would just be this weird guy who would try and eat everything that you defeat.
One character, which I'm actually part of the campaign. It is a Womback in the Typhon campaign. That person is quite the character, especially people who watch it.
What is it about him particularly? What can we draw out and perhaps emulate? What is it about Womback that is appealing? That's interesting.
I guess his craziness and how he goes about life, at least his character.
He's definitely an unusual one, and brought to life not only with interesting or weird values and whatnot, or his perspective on things, but the character uses a voice. He talks in a particular manner, has a descriptive way about his look. All of these things are contributive to the character being memorable. Absolutely. Other examples?
I have an example that comes to mind, but it's probably not the kind of example most people would immediately come to think of. But when I think characters that are memorable, one of the things I think is characters that can actually make me feel something in regards to what they say. And one character that could do that to me was, I unfortunately forget his name, but the ferryman in Dishonored. The thing about him is that generally he seems like a pretty simple, just quest NPC, so to speak, in that he brings you to where you need to go and tell you some stuff about what's going on in the area and such. But depending how you go about how you go about various things in the mission, he might, when he learns how things happen, he will speak of how he feels about certain things, and it at times did make, when I tried going for a, shall we call it evil run or however you want to describe it in that game, I think chaos is what they referred to it at. But when I tried to do that, he when he talked about things, he actually made me kind of feel bad about it, rather than just making me feel like an NPC is going, oh, woe and horror, I have to say these things because that's my role. And there's also another character that like really, really got to me in Metro Last Light. I'm not going to spoil what the character is, but there is at one point where you basically there's a point where you get your hands on a traitor who did something very, very horrible, and you have the choice to kill him or just knock him out and leave him for someone else to, capture, for your allies to capture later. And at the point I felt at the first time I played it, my reaction after knowing all the horrible things this person had done and such, my choice was to kill it. But then this other character that was like relatively young and naive started talking to me about the decision and saying that I suppose things like this has to be done, and I just spoiled something so precious. I can't do this, so I just immediately loaded and did it again and did the different option. I couldn't deal with it.
I suppose when NPCs, when you see in just the everyday characters like that in the world, the consequences of your actions, that can really drive it home to players. Like if you're fighting some dragon cult or some such, and then they have a drake rampage through a town, most generic games would just have you fight the drake, kill off a few cultists, then you go and look for them. But if, say, you're stuck in the town, and then suddenly you've got to see everyone who's just suddenly become homeless because a drake broke their house in half, that'd be interesting to see. You could go into lots of little minor details, like maybe one of them's got to leave and go and live with a relative somewhere else, and they're having a really hard time with that. Then, if it's a long game, you could bring that back later if you go there, and then you find out what it's been like for them ever since. If you see what the NPCs, how they're interacting with all the things that you have to deal with, and not doing as well as you because they can't just kill the drake and stuff like that.
Yeah, the NPCs that are not static elements, but dynamic things that change with with your actions, then you have to live with those. So go on.
Yeah, there's actually two characters that stand out to me. But before I get to them, I gotta say hi to Silver. It's been a long time, my friend.
Hey, how are you doing? Have you been? How'd that project go? The big NPC codex thing that you were working on last time. That turned out well.
Stop that temporarily because we are now transcribing all our videos on the channel for closed caption. So it's taking some effort. But the two characters that stood out to me, and down to the Christmas but one that
Having a hard time hearing you. Maybe pull your mic a little closer.
everyone should know the first one, and that's Visit Jordan by R.A. Salvatore. In the books, he begins like each chapter with his view on the world, what's going on in his life. And that always stood out to me. The one that is my own character is Corpus Lantis, my known wizard, who his backstory, he had his mentor who was murdered, and he went off on his own, and for a long time he was asleep. That's
Really hard to hear you. Like it's chopping out real loud, real faint, and then not at all. Maybe some connections.
plugging it back in.
It could be that too. Yeah.
Is that better?
at the moment.
Okay. Sometimes my mic just needs to be plugged. But with Corpus, the thing that really stands out with me is its interactivity. Corpus is kind of wide, but happens so much, whereas it's familiar to this really sarcastic fun at his master.
Yeah, I don't think we can hear your mic, just like at all. It's really off. So maybe just tweak that a little bit, and I'll chime in while you take a look at the sounds on someone else's a character that I've had a memorable interaction with in someone else's game, an NPC. Not just characters generally, but specifically tabletop, because that's our thing. One of the characters that has stood out, I would echo the Wombat character, but there's one in the Fuzz and Friends campaign that my friend Burke, created. Basically a power-hungry, maniacal, minion-mad sort of supervillain, essentially, is what he was. And he had a memorable name, Oman Zaire, and he screeched. It was kind of annoying. He tried to make everyone his minions, and he also utilized a lot of magic and like electronics, sort of developing their steampunk. And he was really memorable because he usually was, he was significant or stood out in a very particular way. He needs some distinguishing feature because our games are, it's not every day you're going in and spending 8 hours a day playing this game. It's every now and again in most people's cases. So it really has to get right to it, I find, for an NPC to be memorable. Pick a couple attributes, play them up strong, and they'll stand out for that. As opposed to trying to make them very nuanced is not going to work in most cases because you just don't have time to develop it. But Oman Zaire stands out for me.
One NPC which I still remember to this day, which was one of my first campaigns besides for the Typhon campaign. Our characters, we were escaping a ruined city. We encountered what would be peasants trying to escape the city, seeing them being killed off, trying to flee to a better life. Think of, I guess, American Dream, people trying to flee for a better life by getting killed in the process by bandits. I sort of feel sorry for the citizens that were killed by the bandits. Just thinking, they do not have the abilities as the typical adventurer would have. And so it sort of made me rethink how my character behaves around people who are not fortunate enough to have the adventurer's skill set. If you can understand where I'm coming from in this.
Could be.
No,
Not perfectly clear, but yeah, go ahead.
I agree. The whole idea of vulnerability does give an element of like it gives you a sense of, at least it gives a lot of people a sense of either that you want to protect, or a sense that it gives a sense of perspective as well, in that you realize how capable you are and how much of a potential responsibility you could choose to put over these other NPCs situations, and that also like puts you in a position where you don't necessarily choose, you just feel that you should do a thing or the other because you can and they can't.
So a sense of responsibility can definitely influence things. I wanted to shift a conversation. I've been posting roleplay of the week for 8 weeks now, 7 or 8 weeks, and the responses have been really either it should make sense, I suppose, if you just look at it, but I was surprised, and maybe I shouldn't be, at the amount of violent responses to situations that, if they occurred in real life, would not, 99% of the time, no violence would ensue. So I've noticed even in the most peaceful one, "You've saved my city. How can I reward you?" And then half the comments are, "I stab him in the eye." I mean, I didn't understand that response. Why do you think that is, or touch on any of that regarding the ultra-violent response or the ultra-violent reasoning or just tone that so many people seem to have?
It's probably because they think they're the player and they can do what they want because they're the player of the game, so no matter what, their GM's not gonna care, I guess. They don't really see the issues that they have out of a lot of players that just kill people for no reason, and then the character ends up in jail and they can't play that character anymore.
I mean, I know examples of people whom, I mean, this kind of behavior exists in most online communities and games and such, and the I don't know if it's the interesting, terrifying, or sad thing about it is that many of these people, if you put them in try to tell them that this is, you know, more serious or whatever, their reaction often is, what? It's just a joke, man. When even they present it in a manner that doesn't sound like a joke, because somehow they do not get that connection where they feel that they are making. They get the feeling like the person playing a single-player RPG and just trying to push the limits. They have that sense of approach. And this even occurs in, well, this can occur plenty in multiplayer games and such. But just because you're not seeing another person on the other side receiving whatever happens because of your choices, it somehow isn't real or isn't serious. It's just a joke to them, and yeah, it sort of saddens me to see this, but it's a natural. It seems sadly natural to a lot of people, unless they get really invested in something, which is hard to do for a lot of people. There's always going to be the people who just looks at it from the outside and, you know, has the approach of, I can do that, so I want to do that just to see what happens, or just because I can, so to speak.
I would like to add my bit in. I think the person just want to say it to get the attention within the comment section. Maybe they just want to be a troll about it.
Yeah, that's also an element to it all that plays in, of course. I forgot to mention that.
Yeah.
I actually watched a video just yesterday which is talking about this exactly. I'll post a link into the chat for anyone who's interested. It's about the escalation of violence, and he reckoned that he thinks might just be the design of the character sheet, the fact that in games like D&D, combat is centre front, and in the very middle of your front page of the character sheet in 5e, that's your attacks and your weapons. It could just be people aren't really getting into the RP all that much, but the fact that as soon as they think violence has started, then they immediately go to the first thing they think is appropriate violence, so they'll draw the sword or the warhammer or whatever, whereas in, say, real life, gives the example, you might shove someone, or they might shove you, so then you try and do it back, and then you go a little bit further, you might punch them if you're just escalating natural, because D&D is so focused around combat, and it encourages you to do as well as you can. And when you see the rules that says punch someone, you get 1 point of damage, or even non-lethal damage in previous editions, compared to your regular combat stuff, it just makes it feel like a really poor, unoptimal choice to do. So it's almost like it's encouraging you to make that jump in escalation of violence instead of just make it a natural flow up that might stop at some point, which would what happened in real life if this was happening.
Other thoughts from on the whether, I mean, should this be not looked down upon? I know there's some people enjoy storytelling, some enjoy both numbers, they take it seriously, some don't. But should we look down on the idea that this is a game and is form of escape, and some people really want to do something different? And in real life, they probably are completely passive people. Is it, I don't know, a healthy exercise or reasonable to think that as we play a game, we can play it as violently as we want?
I think the major element to this is like the way you usually in videos and such make very clear distinction between this is a solo campaign kind of thing, or like the main element to whether these things are truly bad or reprehensible or negative or such really comes down to, are you negatively influencing any other actual person? You can sit around killing NPCs in old RPGs all you want, and no one is actually hurt. But it's when you have that approach in a multiplayer environment of any kind, be it online games or be it tabletop games, that it becomes a problem. And I'd say it's when people have a hard time separating the two that issues occur often.
Okay. Yeah, one of the things for me is similar to what we're talking about when I'm upset or having a bad day. I'm able to take it into an RPG or a video game and kill the bad guy. Instead of, oh, I'm upset with my mom, it's gonna really blow up, I just kind of transpose whoever I'm upset on into the monster that they're killing, and it makes me feel better. So there could be a lot of that going on too.
Alrighty. So topics on anyone else's mind, questions to pose or things to raise?
This is a question. When you have unlimited amount of freedom, when do you actually draw the line when it comes to doing a evil act? The one example I brought, a NPC, remind me of an infamous person, how he did stuff. In the quest line I was doing, I said no to do how he wanted to do things. I said I will deal with the rebels in a peaceful fashion while he wanted to kill them off. So just curious, where do you draw the line of doing something evil, which is beyond the point?
When you're a player or when you're a DM?
As a player, where do you draw the line of, I am going to be evil, but I am not going to be passing this line? Let's say, I will kill these people, but I will not kill everyone. Something like that, a solid line you will not pass.
The difference between evil and stupid evil for no reason, so to speak.
Yeah. What is your limit when it comes to doing stuff like that? Do you have a line that you will not pass no matter what?
The main line that I go by is, what is the rest of the group agreeable to? How do they handle situations? Because you can be evil and still handle stuff the same way as a lawful group.
My rule of thumb when it comes to being evil is I would do what is necessary, but if it go beyond the point of doing the job, such as causing more misery, then you have to. I will just say, no, I will not do that. If you understand where I'm coming from.
For myself, it's actually about the character's outlook on the action. It's not just the specific action. It's whether or not I'm still questioning whether this character is evil or not. If I'm not questioning evil, then they probably are when I'm doing horrible things. But if I'm doing horrible things and I'm actually still thinking about whether or not this is bad or whether or not it needs to be done, but it's a necessary evil, then they haven't crossed the line. But as soon as they're not thinking about that in the slightest, then they've gone over it.
This topic brought up came up to my mind when I was reading one book, The Lucifer Effect, how good people can do evil acts without actually knowing it. I think the expression is good. I think I will. The quotation will come back to me.
Yeah, there is the element of someone who is, so to speak, completely amoral in their actions, and only go specifically for a goal. They may not they wouldn't necessarily act evil at all times. They wouldn't necessarily, they might go out of their way towards violence or such if that is the more optimal choice. If the person, assuming the character is, just doesn't care one way or the other. It's often when a character goes out of their way to do something just to try and prove a point, or try and set some sort of example. That things start going downhill fast, in my opinion. But not to say that the character that doesn't care one way or the other and just does things is necessarily neutral either. But there is a difference. There is a difference between, like, say, let's say a robot walking straight through someone's house, through every wall just to get to a target, or said robot walking through the house and killing everything on its path just because it can.
I got a question to pose. Recently, in the last actually 3 games that I've run, the party has received loot, and they've received it in a kind of a bundle. They weren't really getting. They got some here and there as the adventure proceeded, but in multiple campaigns that I just thought happened to coincide, they all got, say, like 10 magic items, 10 big upgrades all happening right now. And some of the players are here, but what is kind of your preference, or what has been your experience in, I really like getting an equipment upgrade or a magic item every now and again, but with some consistency, or I'm okay with droughts, and then I get kind of a glut of like, we've reached a big milestone, here's some big upgrades. Where would you fall with that?
Magic item for me, I would like to have them to be some type of a reward or serve a purpose at a certain mile mark. Having too much magic items handed out to everyone at once sort of kill the purpose when handing out loot. Too much loot spoils everyone. Too little, and everyone is not happy about loot.
Well, let's say you have 10 magic items, like you said, and 5 players. You have to divide it equally, but if you just have, let's say, 2 magic items, then there's going to be people that are fighting over who gets what. So I know that a group of magic items will allow for people to get rid of the ones they don't want, and also allow everyone to get fair share.
One of the things I do as a DM is I use it as a reward system, and all the players get 1 item that time, whether it's a magic weapon, and I give it in a roleplay manner, such as they go into an armory and they can pick out what interests them. And then I make it all the same and like plus what a magical weapon, for example. Oh, later on, after a couple sessions, they might go back to the armory and get armor. And that's just kind of how I've done it, and it's worked really well. There's never been any argument on who gets what, because each of them can pick out something that would interest their character.
I have a slight thought on this. I'm not really sure where I personally stand on whether I like things to come step by step or all at or in big bundles. But one thought I have is that you can ahead of time we have like sort of an in between sessions discussion or at an early point in the campaign just have ask the players what kind of items do your characters what kind of items do you think about is like would be your immediate upgrade so to speak in terms of what you want and such, and then you can that way you can have things can have a more natural like progression towards what people get, because if there's one thing everyone says, then if everyone says I need better armor, or like I don't know 3 out of 4 says that they need better armor, then you can have you can plan that, okay, then we'll put some sort of armory event, or if there's or if people say that they are interested in very specific things, then you can add those, and they have add those at various situations, and then they have a more natural place. Because initially the first thought I can think is that having an item and it not necessarily being useful for the players in question, or like it's something that is just so not generic but so universally useful or universally good and then having it limited, that's the kind of situation that is more tricky, because I think it might be good to have some perspective on what the players are looking at, and not necessarily to say that they will get everything, but to just have that around.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. I remember this was a couple of years ago. I was in a game and we were just getting our first loot, like big upgrades even. So we were in this cave system and we met with these weird little creature things, and they had an armory stash of all the previous adventurers who have gone through here and passed and died and everything. And they have their armors and everything all set up in there. And they allowed us to take 2 things from each one of them. And what the GM did was said, you can get 1 masterwork item and 1 magic item. You can either have magic armor, weapon, or a random magic wondrous item. And then a masterwork sword or armor. So he let us choose between those 2 as to what we want, and that's how we sort of decided what we got. So I ended up with a masterwork shield and a flaming longsword.
That's cool. There's also the element.
Different, unique way of getting your inventory. You didn't know what you were picking out. You were just getting random items to choose from.
Of course, the whole drip feeding of items can be more natural in a way that you can put them naturally in situations, and they can have character significance in various ways. Like, let's say one player's backstory is that they have like a vendetta against a certain group of some kind, some cult or some faith or some like evil faith or whatever it might be of any kind, or and then you have an event that involves these creatures, and they have, I don't know, some sort of an item that is corrupted or cursed or whatever, and the player can go through, and the player in question has some means of decursing or cleansing the item, and then they can use it against them, and that can be a big, like, it's more integrated to the character itself, I feel, and that's almost, in terms of how it feels from as a player who's very story focused. That's the kind of stuff that would make me feel the best about it, but it's also the trickiest in the way that then you're drip feeding items to specific people, and you have to like balance things, and you have to make sure people don't feel like I'm not getting anything and they're getting all this cool stuff, and then there comes the issue of has everyone gotten their time in the spotlight and all that stuff. So it feels the best, but it's also the hardest to balance.
Right. I think I've done that before. I had a player who killed, I forget what it was, some mutant creature or something, who wielded an evil sword, and the player went on a redemption quest for the sword to make it into a good alliance sword, and that was his paladin redemption for the sword. And that became his sword, and he upgraded it throughout the entire campaign. I thought that was an interesting way of incorporating that.
That's actually how I'm going to be introducing a few magic items in the adventure I'm running now. I'm running the Princes of the Apocalypse Elemental Evil adventure, and each of the Princes of the Apocalypse has a big badass weapon of their element. And after you beat them, the adventure says you're supposed to use it to close an elemental portal which destroys the weapon, but I'm not having that. I'm keeping these weapons around. I'm letting the players use them. So I'll have to try and find some way. I'm going to say they're corrupted or something by elemental evil, and I have to try and find a way to cleanse them to make them good again. Most of the really decent magic items in my setting are all sentient, so I have to try and I'm going to think some way for them, give them character, and then have the players try and interact with them on that level to turn them good again in some way. It also means, because most of the items are sentient, I'm using less of them, I'm giving less of them out, but I'm making them a lot better when I do. Like from the plain D&D handbook, in the Dungeon Master Guide, there's an item, Periaptive Health or something, which just auto-stabilizes you whenever you go down. Added on from one of the Iron Stones, the +2 Constitution bonus from that into the same item. So I can give out less items because it's harder to make them because they're all a character, then make them bigger and better as they go along. That way it'll feel like a better item when they finally do get one.
Mm-hmm.
Another good example I can think of is Blaze's Black Sword from Sinland Trials. Andrew, you've had Blaze has had some interesting conversations with that one, and it's put him in some interesting situations as well. So there's a lot to that.
It's a definitely a neat thing to deal with and to wrestle with, as far as an enabler to his already over-aggressive and arrogant personality. But I have to be tricky about when and how much I use it, not just because it's corrupting in-game element, but the more interactive or the more... It's really that juggling of attention and spotlight. I could converse with the blade and have it revolve around me as much as possible. That could be the danger of the more advanced, the more intricate, elaborate items crafted specifically for people, and those things can get out of hand. But I do like that interaction there.
This is one item which come to mind. In the campaign I am in right now, me and the group, we are actually trying to convince one of our players to become BFF with his sword, which is a very intelligent sword without a personality. So there is some humorous point along the way, trying to convince him to be friends with it.
On the subject of sentient weapons and everything, what about cursed objects and sentient cursed objects?
I had a rather good one of those included. It's had to go now because the character died, and we had to retire them because it just wasn't meshing well with the rest of the group. But he wanted an item that would charm people. He wanted a charm person item, which would be rather useful. So I had him go into this shop. He was looking to buy one, and then there was the just window on a perch because items can take form, and then just had him roll a will save. And he failed. Naturally, it might have been a charisma save. And then I had him be charmed by the item. And then he just turned around and said, "Oh, can you get me out of here?" Basically, it took it a bit longer than this, but I've had this owl go on and said, "Oh, this person who owns me, he's a horrible person. He's had me bonded to him for years. He's doing his work. He has me doing his dirty work. He charms all his customers so he can bilch them out of all the extra money. It's horrible. Will you get me out of here?" Then just subtly slipped the player a note by the when he got the owl, and attuned to it. By the way, you're now permanently charmed by this item. It took him a while to realise it, but everyone in the party does what the item does. It charms people, has them basically take it wherever it wants to go, do whatever it wants to do, and then when it gets bored of them, it charms someone else and accuses its previous owner as being a horrible kidnapper who's kept it as its servant for all these years. And then it just tricks someone else into taking it and leaving and going wherever it wants to go. So,
I really like that one.
Cursed items are really fun when they're cursed and sentient, because then you can have the curse be that the item disagrees with the player and it wants to do something else.
One quick thing, if I just may. We don't need to discuss it, but I just want to say I'm almost surprised that Quinn, Andrew, hasn't tried to detect thoughts on the blade in any form. Or if that's even possible, I don't know. But that's just a thought I've had, and feel free to do with it what you will. Go on, yeah. Cursed sentient items. Okay.
I remember a player, he got talked to by a cursed weapon before, and he's like, I'm gonna take in and call him, like, I don't remember, he's daggery or something. It was a dagger, and he called it something like that. And then the cursed item, what it is it will attach itself to an owner and then have that owner kill itself, eventually. So we're trying to take the weapon from him, but because we all know it's cursed. Like, we read the documents and it says it's cursed. But for some reason the player doesn't, like, care that it's cursed. He wasn't charmed by it either. Like, he wanted to keep the dagger. And we just had a fight over the dagger, and finally we ended up destroying it, but it was kind of interesting cursed object, I think.
One of my favorite cursed items is actually the whole point of a campaign I run on Monday nights, and they call the cups of Tiamat because they're in her scales. And there's 10 cups, each of them do something drastic, like cause famines, wars, but the players have to gather them up. And when all 10 are together, it said you can force a deity to do something that you wish. So, you have demons, you have evil cults looking for these cups, and the players are gathering them up in order to destroy them. But when a player carries it, it will slowly change their alignment towards evil, and if they sleep with it in their possession, it gives them all sorts of nightmares. And I use that a lot of times to reveal information and to the players about what's coming up in the campaign, and or something that player needs to be aware of.
I've often had a challenging, or find those cursed items challenging in the amount of metagaming required to avoid that temptation of knowing what it is or having a strong suspicion out of game, of not wanting it to be to do detrimental to you, so you kind of assume you don't engage in it. But then it's also a challenge to have that alignment change over time, that corruption. It's not only is it you're bad for our party because you're not as good, your martial abilities or whatever, but also now each night we got to deal with this stuff. So I would probably, in my experience, I haven't introduced them kind of just casually. Oh, there's just a curse item in here. They will usually have a significance or a point that can be dealt with pretty quickly, because a long term, it'll get boring and draining, and people will, they'll kind of become a burden in a this is not fun, this is not interesting burden, or we just gotta sit and watch Bill and his cursed teddy bear talk again for 10 minutes every time we take a rest. It's
Yeah, you have to be very careful for when you use it. For example, the paladin who's KB run for like 5 sessions, he had 2 dreams in between all 5 sessions. And the whole time he didn't change alignment because he managed to get rid of that item within a week of actual game time.
Yeah, I remember strongly one cursed item I was a player. It wasn't really cursed. It was a bag of holding that could hold oxygen in it, and so it had moving people in it. And what happened was, when we grabbed the bag, there was a group of bandits that have already hidden themselves inside the bag. So every time we're just putting gold and everything into there, and they just would put anything that went into the item up for ransom, usually for alcohol or women. And then finally we got sick of it, and we ended up going into the bag of holding and having a whole fight scene, and like our loot's flying around us and everything's going on, and we're trying to fight these bandits, and it was a really nice cursed item, I guess, quotation marks.
One curse item which I liked until it was fixed in an update. Baldur's Gate 2, one item, Girdle of Gender Change. If you give the one item to Edward, he actually complained that his gender got changed from male to female. Then he, at the end of the conversation, thought, I can make this work for me. So you can have entertaining conversation or dialogue options there when you're playing RPGs or even in a campaign like those items.
Let's be honest, who hasn't had their gender changed in D&D yet?
I haven't, but I'm still waiting for a opportunity for my character in the Friday group I play with. I want to get my character stealth in his way into a brothel to actually solve a mystery there. Just picture what would be a Tengu. People cannot tell the difference between male and female, so he's going to try to get his way into there, pretend to be female. So there's going to be an interesting role-playing session right there, pretending to be the opposite sex.
Yeah, I've had like 2 or 3 characters get turned into the opposite sex.
It is entertaining when those things work out.
And then just one character who was completely fine with either, whatever. Don't care.
Another thought I've had in the line of cursed items, leading off from what you just said about the girdle of gender change, which could be useful depending on what the person wants. A curse doesn't have to be a bad thing. It's like a bit of magic that sticks with you after you stop using the item. So this really powerful magic sword that Church keeps, and whoever wields this sword is imbued with divine power, but it's a curse, so you keep the divine power even if you lose the sword. So the Church has got this sword under lock and keep in some high tower or dungeon somewhere, and they don't want anyone to use it because they want to be the only ones who get to wield the power. So when you go to this dungeon, they've all wielded the sword, and they all have this curse from the sword, which gives them this power, and they're not letting anyone else have it because they don't want their god's power out to the masses. So, and there's everyone's trying to get into this church or whatever because they want this holy power. That could be a really interesting. That could also be an interesting way to have an encounter with good aligned people who are your opponents, which rarely come along opportunities for that.
Alternatively, you can also have a cursed item that's really just, you know, where the curse really is just silly, like the old classical example of a cup that you cannot spill from, which means that you cannot drink from it either. Or something like that. Just present it as like the holy grail, and then the person gets it, and that's all it does. Just, you know, just to put things in perspective or something.
One curse item which would be
An
entertaining.
artificer created a legend. Yeah, I was just going to add on another silly item for that. An artificer created some legendary, this legendary chalice which would fill up forever any liquid that was put in it, but it could only do one. And it was, and by the time he managed to finish making this, he was really old, so he put prune juice in it. So it will forever fill with prune juice.
One item which would one curse item which would be quite useful in certain circumstances for part of a session would be, I think, one tale, Midas and the Golden Touch. Just give a NPC the curse item to turn everything into gold, so he can actually sell it for gold by making things into gold to make gold. So one of those items that you have to be careful about.
Actually, I'm going to include that in my current campaign as well, but specifically on a Gorgon, who instead of turning things to stone, turns things to gold. So players go into this really lavish chamber, and there's these golden statues everywhere of people, and if they haven't quite figured it out that they're real people yet, they'll just think, oh, brilliant, this person's mega rich, all the walls are made of gold, everything, there's golden statues of people, and then if they try and fight against this creature, they might axe into gold if they're not careful about it.
If you want to have a scenario for those statues, have you seen the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe? When the four heroes went to the Witch Castle, they seen all of the would-be enemies of the Witch turn to stone. So you can have a courtyard filled with creatures in position of being feared by the said creature at the time of their death or something. Or you could have a scroll that could bring them back to life from being a gold statue to being a living creature. Like a scroll of unturned stone flesh or something like that.
Mm.
Yeah, but have it only for gold and not stone. To bring them back to
I'll
life.
probably just call it unpetrification or something.
Speaking of Gorgons, I had an interesting idea a while back that I've written it down to use if I end up DMing a game, but I had the idea of a half dragon, half Gorgon, as in using the half dragon rules and having the base be a Gorgon, so to speak, so that it would have a paralyzing breath and then the petrifying glare and things like that. And I believe I posted on the Facebook group about what is the most interesting combination for a half dragon that you've ever thought of, and I got a surprisingly few responses. So, how many of you have ever actually used as a DM used or in a game seen anyone use a half dragon, and what kind of combinations have you ever encountered?
This was a NPC, but the creature was half dragon, half orc, with a giant gene mix in. So just picture a very tall half orc giant dragon kid. This MP was in a fight with one of my party members at a bar, and you can see which one won. Easily enough, it was a big half dragon. So you can have a NPC like that serve a purpose. Just to test the water to see how well it fares.
Yeah.
That's actually kind of what I'm sort of going to be doing. My next adventure, we're going to be doing it tomorrow, but too many people are going to be turning up, and so it'll be 7 people, so I have to put it off. But it's the first time I've ever played a high-level campaign, level 15. First time I've ever done double digits. So I'm playing a character which I'm going to be building now for this game and repurposing as a boss later in my adventure. Be quite fun. Really useful to build stuff like that you can reuse for other opportunities. As for the half dragons, I haven't encountered anything that brilliant thus far, but if I were to stick half dragon on something, it would be a fae, and it would have draconic butterfly wings.
That sounds cool.
Yeah, that actually reminds me of the one time I've seen it used. I had a halfling who was half dragon, but it was half baby dragon. And so that made a very interesting player character, as they had some of the baby dragon abilities. And these big, huge, draconic butterfly wings that were just awesome, and they did the description of what this little halfling with scales looks like. Did it change my settings again?
I haven't dabbled much in creating hybrids and halvesies and whatnots. I suppose I just think of the creatures, and I usually will just go with what's there with like some cosmetic flavor. So I haven't really done that myself, but you could go straight absurdity with half dragon, half warthog, or some little creature or something, or go something gloriously terrifying like half out rider, half dragon. So there's a dragon, something weird. Yeah.
The reason I got onto that line of thought in the first place was because there are half dragon rules in the monster manual. So there's like a half dragon can be one of these types of creatures, and they get these parameters, and that just got me thinking.
Yeah.
I don't suppose people will mind if I sort of just ask a question and see what you all think, would you? I could do a bit of help in my current game. As I mentioned earlier, it's Princes of the Apocalypse, and I'm running it in a very sandboxy style, not very... There's these 4 elemental cults. I've added wood and metal as well, so it's the Eastern style, and kept air, so I've got 6 cults. And the adventures basically just stop the elemental cults from destroying the world. They've each got 3 sort of strongholds. There's 3 on the surface, then they have 3 underground that are temples, and then deeper below that they all have 3 where there's deeper below that they all have 1 that guards a portal to their elemental plane. And I think I've made a bit of a blunder, but in the book there are tunnels between all of the underground temples that link them up. So what's actually happened is my players have gone and taken off, and now they've ended up running around underground, and they're bypassing all the keeps on the surface because it's a sandbox and they can more or less go wherever they think to go. I'm not sure if I've made a horrible mistake here, because they almost died, all of them, in the very first encounter in the water temple before they managed to basically RP the way out of it. And I thought they might die in the water temple. Now they've found themselves in the fire temple, and I know without a shadow of a doubt they definitely will die if they try and start shit here. I was wondering if any of you have ever encountered anything like this and what you might do to try and balance them not dying and the sandbox and getting everything done, because I now have to try and either cut out all the keeps on the surface, which they could just bypass, and I've been using milestone rules, so that means they won't level up after each of those keeps, which they would have done if they'd have taken them down. Or I'm not sure what to do now. They can bypass that. They can go underground. Should I try and warden off all the underground areas so they have to go through the surface keeps to get down into the other temples, or should I just sort of let them run amok and try and see where it goes?
This is a question. Would the NPCs would they know the tunnels they are connected to the other strongholds?
I can't hear you, Silver.
Silver, you're muted.
Oh, my bad. Yeah, unmuted now. Yeah, they do know about all these passages in their keeps. It's under this giant hill, and it's an ancient dwarven city, and they've each sort of taken up residence in a specific district in that city, and they know about all the tunnels.
As a GM, if the cultist as a GM, if all of the cultists know of the routes and they heard of the group going through the tunnels, I would assume they would probably stop the adventurers in the tunnel, maybe blocking it off. It would make sense with the information they would gather. But it's up to the GM.
Yeah. Two ideas I've had, just thinking about it. I haven't had the experience myself, but two thoughts I have is you could either have some sort of like a gate of some kind that cannot be unlocked without you know, doing certain things, or it's like blocked from one side and would require a lot of force to be broken open. There's also the idea that you could have some sort of like some sort of creature or whatever that is guarding the path in between, and that the creature itself is somehow connected to, I don't know, some sort of power nodes within the fortresses, and so that for every such node that is destroyed, the creature is weakened, or something like that. So that you could have something to indicate that this is a creature not to be dealt with, and the creature doesn't necessarily want to deal with you. He essentially just wants to swat you back and keep resting or something.
One of the ideas I've had is use elemental walls to block them all off. So wall of fire, wall of water, things like that, wall of wind, wall of force, to try and lock them all off. And then they would have to come in down from the surface. And then they would have to come in down from the surface. But one of the other things I want to very much getting feedback from someone.
It is your mic. It is your mic.
So if you're on now and you have speakers going and not headphones, that may be where or the chat playing. I don't hear it at the moment. Well, it's
I've got headphones in.
Yeah. Okay. There we
Alright,
go.
seems to have stopped now.
So I would say you could certainly gate off the content in the game, and so you have to, which makes it not so much sandboxy, right? It makes it a little more linear. You have to do these three things in order to move on to this thing, which is not bad. It's fine. I generally prefer guided with choices, but one of the things you could do out of game, which would be more work for you, but it would let them feel like they could go wherever they wanted. And you could give warnings to stay away from some places or whatnot, but one of the things you could do is take a lot of the statistics. So say water temple is level 5, and then fire temple is level 10, and they want to go to the fire temple first, but they're level 5, so they're going to get creamed by this stuff. Just swap the stats for most of the things. You might have to do a little fine tuning of exactly, well, this has a fire attack, so I have to change the damage to this, or well, that magma plume trap, it says 10d6 here, but they're level 5, so 5d6. You work it out a little bit. You can just utilize or borrow most of what's already written, apply it to this different place, and then they can go there, and you don't have to worry about everywhere they go will be appropriate for them if you so choose. And it'll just get harder as they go along. That would be an alternative to in-game plot devices, story hooks, gates, locks, those kind of things. Mike,
one
welcome.
of the
Jamie.
things I was really worried about trying to cordon areas off. The adventure book encourages, and I rather much like this, that you can sort of work with some of the cults and then get them fighting each other, because they don't really like each other either. And I've sort of laid some groundwork for that, but I'm thinking maybe if I just hold off that into cult antagonism later and I shepherd them back to the surface, maybe I can let them handle all the surface keeps first, and then when they get back down, then all the routes are open, and they should be able to handle that next level, regardless of which one they want to go to first, and then I can have all that then. I think that would work. Just if I put it as more linear now and then open it up later when they can handle it a bit better.
I do not know the adventure, the module path, but does it say what the effects are if you have the cult fight each other in their civil war they would have?
It doesn't really give much. It doesn't really give anything specific. No, basically that it leaves that to the DM to try and figure out as to how they want to do it.
Consider also, since there is no, I mean, the players in the idea of a saving the world situation, of course they don't want the world to fall because they're part of the world and that's heroic and whatnot. But it's not a really personal kind of a mission or task. So what you might do if you want them, or the book's designed for them to be on these surface fortresses first, is to place people, objects, some connection to the characters specifically, not the broader elemental evil plot, but instead these guys, your cousin's locked up there, your father's ancient sword, you've been seeking it out and you know it's in one of these things. Making it very personal for them will mean we want to go do that. We want to make sure that that's taken care of first, as opposed to we just can't because there's a big tree in the way. We can't because we don't want to, because we're driven by what's here. Could be a strong selling point depending on your players.
That could be interesting. The main plot hook the adventure gives is that some diplomats have been kidnapped by the evil cultists, and they're all separated throughout the different temples that they've got hidden underground and stuff. So that's been the main driving plot thus far. But if I could branch that out and add in other things, I know one of my players, he's got a very fiery character, and he's looking to basically try and take over this fire cult when he gets there, rather than kill them all off and make them his own. So that could be interesting if I could put maybe other characters that they're all that they interact with into some of these other cults. One of them's part of a mercenary group. I could try and put members of their group into one of the other cults, either as prisoners or they could have joined. Maybe they'll try and go there first then, if I need to cordon them off. If they can't handle one of the high-level cults, send them to a lower-level one with positive reinforcement in that way, rather than just walls that they can't get through.
That's the idea only. The person that wants to have the fire cult to himself, you could have them being used as an army against the other cults when you do go to war with them.
I like that idea.
Sure.
One of the things I was going to do, if they do manage to get cults to fight, basically reduce their numbers when they go to the temple. So if they get the water and fire cult fighting and then they go through the fire temple, there'll be less cultists left because a fair few of them already died. But that could be interesting. If they get the fire cult on their side, then they can they've got a bit of direction to push them in then.
So I'm going to hop in here and give Jonathan, Jamie, or Mike a chance to, if there's anything on your minds. I just got about a few minutes left myself, but we haven't really heard from you guys, which is fine. You don't have to talk if you don't want to. But I want to give you the moment here before we adjourn. If not, sounds like no. That's all right. No worries. Just watching.
I actually had one thing I did want to ask and get John Fortcast's opinion on as well. Just really quick. And we had a situation come up in one of our sessions that other night where one of the players was, they lost the feeling of being immersed in the session and then had a really hard time getting back into it. So I was kind of wondering what some DMs did to kind of help bring that immersion back once it's been broken.
So I think I missed some of those words. It was a little choppy. Something is broken. They couldn't get it back. I'm not sure. What can you say it again?
Players have had a hard time finding immersion in the game, is what I heard. So how do you get players back into the game after that immersion has been broken? How do you draw them back in?
Well, it's going to get broken every time you leave the table. I mean, there's no way to stay permanently engaged. It's at the start of each session that there's a variety of things you can do to get people to feel like they're back in the world, that they're playing their characters a little more. Having a warm-up exercise, something I've started doing, something I've recommended that Hark Angel Arts does really well, is to start off with just a warm-up question that you answer in character. I award inspiration for it, for doing that. So if you participate and you role play either your character's inner monologue or their thoughts about what happened last time, they summarize, you set the tone and the stage. It's really, it's up to individuals, but you can certainly do things to promote it by giving an opportunity to focus on those elements that are most immersive to most people, and that's talking about themselves and talking about their character. So you give those opportunities, and I think at the beginning of the session to set the tone, and it's much more likely to happen or come along, in my experience. But they're going to need to be willing to do it.
Having players doing recap is good too.
Yeah, I've been doing both recaps on for each session and also been doing these warm-up questions like Hark does. And both of them have been very well received in my group so far. So it's a great tip, I would say.
You're coming from wherever you're at, and someone could have just rushed home from karate lessons like Gavin, and is like home for 5 minutes before the game starts, and some people have been sitting there for 8 hours just pining over their character's smallest detail, and they've been thinking about all this stuff, and other people would just, they show up, they forget about it, and they show up 10 minutes late. I mean, there's so many different reasons and why people are engaged or not.
In this case, it was a situation we went through almost an entire session, and then like the last half hour, they lost their immersion, and we really wanted to draw them back in for the conclusion of this session.
You might call for a break. All right, so let's take 5, let's take 10, let's step away. And then when they get back, do another warm-up or re-engagement activity so they can segment it. All right, so now we're trying this again. We're going on to another part. And now, all right, so for the next 5 minutes or during the break, think of what would your character say about what's going on right now. And then you come back and you have that little discussion. And then they may click back into what's happening, but you got to get each of them to do it, and you might need to step away first for it to happen.
Okay. Thank you.
So, gentlemen, thank you very much for coming out tonight, for your support of the channel, for the discussion topics and questions, and I enjoy it as always. And I will be surely seeing some of you again soon. I got to hop off here before another event this evening. I look forward to talking with you again.
Happy gaming, everyone.
You new groups are awesome.
It's been a blast. See you all around.
Maybe